everyone. I'm Randy Karraker, and it is great to have you with us on the 101 on Sports. The NFL offseason, from a transaction standpoint, is over now. All the quarterbacks have been moved, the draft is complete, and we should know who the teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl are here in early May. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to talk to two of the preeminent football experts in town, Anthony Stalter and Carey Davis of 101 ESPN, as we bring you the results of the NFL offseason here on the 101 on Sports. And we welcome into the conversation Anthony Stalter. You hear Anthony every afternoon in the Fast Lane from 2 to 6 on 101 ESPN. And my partner on the opening drive from 10 to 7 mornings on 101 ESPN, Carey Davis. He's to also have a new podcast out at 101ESPN.com and on the 101 ESPN app. It's called, fittingly, The Gridiron Guys, which is about the gridiron, I would assume.
A little bit of football. we
haven't gotten anything else yet.
So we enjoy it.
Yeah. Two of the preeminent football experts in the St. Louis metro area. And the NFL has become this monster that's 24/7, 365, and it's literally 365 days a year. And guys, one of the amazing things about the NFL these days is that they can make an Aaron Rodgers story play out for months. They can make a Lamar Jackson story play out for months. And people are interested even though nothing is happening.
Yeah, I mean, football is the thing that, everyone enjoys, they love. And as you said, those stories there are so many layers to it that can be brought to light every single day. So we crave football, even in the offseason. That's why they have the combine on TV now. And every single day, NFL Live is on, and they got different topics. Football is the thing that drives sports, I think. And, there are a lot of stories and a lot of great players to talk about.
Yeah, I think that the NBA has done a really good job of capitalizing on off-season storylines. I remember when they kind of carved into the Super Bowl week a couple of years ago with the Anthony Davis news. But they're still lacking, where the NFL, they're still lagging where the NFL is right now. And Carey's right. I mean, they have figured out how to make off-season storylines go throughout the course of the year, and it's one of the reasons why they're the most popular league.
And Anthony, I mentioned on our radio show last year during the fall that I thought the perfect landing spot for Aaron Rodgers would be the Jets, and lo and behold, that's where he goes. What do you think of that move? First of all, for the Jets.
Well, for the Jets, you have Zach Wilson, and then you had a series of quarterbacks that, Mike White and Flacco. Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl, but he's several years removed from that. So if you're the Jets, and the last winning quarterback you had, say for Mark Sanchez, who went to back-to-back AFC title games in 9 and 10, was Joe Namath. It's been a while. It was Super Bowl III. Randy is, being the trivia god that you are. But when it comes to the Jets, of course you make this move. You take the risk. My only question is, it's less about the compensation. Is he going to play beyond this year? Because you give up essentially a first and a second when it all boils down. If he only plays for 1 year, is that worth it for the Jets?
Right, but it also depends on what they do, because, Carey, you look at the defense, top 5 defense, you look at Garrett Wilson, Offensive Rookie of the Year, you look at adding a guy like Allen Lazard. Rodgers has played with a lot of bad offensive lines and succeeded. What do you think they're able to do offensively?
Well, I love their defense. Quentin Williams at D-tackle, C.J. Mosley, linebacker, Sauce Gardner, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Defensive Rookie of the Year. You get Breece Hall back, who could have been Offensive Rookie of the Year had he stayed healthy the entire year. They got a lot of weapons on that offense. You bring in Allen Lazard, and you got a quarterback finally. I think the Jets are poised to win their division and go on and make a big run in the playoffs. And it's really, once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. But winning your division, if you can win 5 to 6 games in your division and put yourself in a position to make it into the playoffs, that's where everything happens.
There were a couple of other quarterback moves. First of all, Baker Mayfield replacing Tom Brady. One of these things is not like the other. But what do you think of? And Mayfield did kind of reinvent himself with the Rams a little bit. But what do you think of that move with all that talent to Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why Baker looked okay is because he had Sean McVay calling the plays in L.A. But when it comes to this Bucs team, look, they're rebuilding. Jason Light, the GM, sold out when they got Tom Brady to build a Super Bowl winner, and that's what they accomplished. They won the Super Bowl. They got to the playoffs a couple of years with Brady. Probably not the success when it's all said and done that they were expecting, but now it's time to pay that bill. So you've got all these guys that are on big contracts that either they're going to have to move because they got cap space or they're just going to have to ride it out. But Tampa's going to finish fourth in that division, barring any big injuries in other spots.
We'll see.
Who do you like?
I don't know. That division, anybody could win. You never know.
Are there Falcons in that division?
There you go. He passed that up. He just slid them out of the door.
Hey, the Falcons are going back to, I think, 1970s football, and my partner can attest to the fact that, look, you run the football, you're going to be okay. This is how I get them on the Falcons.
Yeah, I do love running the football. They drafted a good one this past weekend, so we'll see how they do.
But I think the Bucs are rebuilding. I mean, there's no question.
And then another team in that division, I don't know how good Derek Carr is. He's the new quarterback in New Orleans. He's put up good numbers over the years, and people say, well, if he was with a better team than the Raiders, a better organization, that he would succeed. What is Derek Carr?
I think Derek Carr is he can be a playoff winning quarterback, and if all the pieces fall in the right place, he could take you to a Super Bowl. I think, especially with the team that they have, if Alvin Kamara is healthy, if Michael Thomas comes back healthy, the season that he had a few years ago, having the most receptions in NFL history, if you get that Michael Thomas on your team and able to make plays for you, they have some weapons on that offense as well. So I think they got a quarterback. They took care of that situation. They've been struggling since Drew Brees left and retired. You get a Derek Carr on that roster and on that team, you find a way to win some games with him.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to the Saints, they're one of the smartest organizations in football. Well, the way that Mickey Loomis, let's be honest, he manipulates the salary cap to his favor. I mean, how many times does he kick in the can down the road on big-time contracts? But he does it to perfection. And the way that they drafted this past weekend, I know we'll get into the NFL draft, but, Carey, Randy, when you're talking about drafting in the trenches constantly, the Saints do it year in and year out. They know how to build a successful team. Then they sprinkle in talent like Alvin Kamara in the third round or Michael Thomas in the second. I think their draft strategy is always sound. And Derek Carr going now from the AFC where it's stacked to an NFC where it's top heavy, that matters big time. And I think the Saints are the team to beat in that division.
Anthony Stalter, Carey Davis coming up. The NFL draft was last weekend. We'll find out who won and who didn't really help themselves with the 2023 NFL Draft. That's coming up on the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Welcome back to the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Anthony Stalter and Carey Davis of 101 ESPN. I'm Randy Karraker with you. And talking a little NFL, the NFL Draft was last weekend. And a week ago Thursday, the Carolina Panthers used the first pick in the draft on Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. 5'10" and 204 for an NFL quarterback. Is that big enough for an NFL quarterback to play for a long time?
I think that's the question, right? Because when you look at Bryce Young play at Alabama, he's got everything. He's got the footwork, he's got the accuracy, he's got the arm strength, he's got the athleticism. Carey and I spent a lot of time on Gridiron Guys talking about the processing ability of a quarterback, and that's something that's very difficult to judge when they're in college. But you look at the way that Bryce Young, you can always watch a QB's head, even from the TV. To the TV feed to see if he's getting to his second read, his third read. Does he look at the sidelines to get his plays? Bryce Young does none of that. I mean, Bryce Young seemingly processes information at a quick rate. I think Bryce Young, I said this to Carey, I think if Bryce Young's 2 inches taller, he's everybody's consensus number one pick, and we're not talking about it. But, Randy, you bring up the size for a reason. There's not a ton of quarterbacks, save for Drew Brees, and, Michael Vick was only 6 foot. There's Russell Wilson. There's only a couple of guys throughout the course of the history of the NFL that succeeded at a high level at that slight of size.
For me, I don't think it's an issue at all. I mean, he survived and really thrived in the toughest, what most people consider the toughest conference in all of college football in the SEC. He's shown himself to be able to, as Anthony said, process things throughout the game, understand his reads, understand, second, third reads, understanding when to run, when not to run. And he does all of those things in a timely fashion. And that's really what quarterbacking is about. You can find windows. I know most of those linemen are going to be 6'5", 6'6", but they're 6'5", 6'6" at Alabama. So he's able to find windows, throwing windows, and able to find his receivers downfield. So I don't see it being an issue for him. And I think he was the right pick for the Carolina Panthers.
The Panthers have not been as bad an organization as the Houston Texans. I thought Houston made a really interesting couple of moves in taking C.J. Stroud with the second pick, the quarterback from Ohio State, and then moving up to have the third pick and take Will Anderson. I guess if you want to build a couple of cornerstones to start a franchise, they kind of are an expansion franchise right now, aren't they? With that roster? Listen, it's not a bad way to start.
Well, I actually loved how they did it. They went and got C.J. Stroud in the second pick, and knowing that would kind of pull back the leverage from all the other teams that might want to trade with Arizona. They were able to make that trade with Arizona to go back up in the draft and then get Will Anderson. So you got your starting quarterback, and you got a guy on the defensive side that just gets after quarterbacks. He is ferocious. He is going to play his butt off every single snap, and he loves football. And you got two of those guys on your roster, and those guys are both winners, more importantly. They have played in some big games in college, which translates a lot to playing in the NFL. So I'm excited that they were able to do that. I thought they had a really good draft in what they did, especially those two first picks.
Yeah, when you have the draft capital that Houston had because of the Deshaun Watson trade, what are you investing in? And I know we'll get to the Lions at some point, but are you investing in impact positions, or are you investing in positions that you're probably just going to recycle every 4 years? Houston, we can debate whether or not Stroud's going to be a good pro. We could debate whether or not Will Anderson's going to be a good pro. But what Houston did was they used that draft capital at two impact positions. Yeah. So from that standpoint, we may look back in 5 years and say they screwed up by not taking the right players. But I love the fact that they took the quarterback, because if you don't have the quarterback, it's a moot point. Yes. And they took a pass rusher. And in those two things in the NFL, among 3 or 4 other positions, those win you football games. So I understood it, and I like what Houston did too.
And in that division, anybody can win.
It's true. Yeah,
so
no doubt about
they could go, they could be the worst team last year. They could be a better team this year.
All right. So you mentioned Detroit. I'm sure somebody here is going to have a not love for Detroit. Let's play loved and didn't love.
Nice.
CD, you go first. Who did you love? What draft?
Oh, I love what Arizona did. I really loved what the Seahawks did, going and getting Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba, 2-star, skilled athletes, one at corner, one at receiver. I love what they did.
Where's Spoon from?
Oh, he's from Illinois. Yeah, ILL, for those that don't know. So I love those two. I love those two teams and those two picks.
All right, Anthony?
I loved what the Philadelphia Eagles did. Yeah. I absolutely loved the fact that this is a team that drafted impact defensive players. They already had pass rushers. Mm-hmm. The Giants already had pass rushers when they selected some of the guys in the first round that they did when they won 2 Super Bowls against the hated New England Patriots. The way to build is getting good trench plays. Good trench play. And when you talk about like A.J. Brown a year ago, they got A.J. Brown, look at that wide receiver. Yeah, absolutely. They did a great job. They already had the offensive line. They already had the defensive line. We didn't know it, but they thought that they had the quarterback, and turns out they were right. And then they added a big target. I love how Howie Roseman continues to draft, and by the way, he decides to pick from the SEC. A couple of years ago, it was mostly Alabama players. Last 2 years have been mostly Georgia teams. I don't know if you've seen Georgia play the last couple of years. It's been pretty good. I loved with the Eagles.
And there's something to be said, and by the way, Jalen Hurts is the quintessential example of this, and Carey, you know it, for knowing how to win, to having players on your roster that at the collegiate level had to work and do everything they could to get over that hump to win a national championship.
Oh, yeah, it's important. I mean, when you're fighting your butt off and working as hard as you can to get there is sweet, and to finally, get all of the confetti fall, and that's when you're playing the game and enjoying it at its highest peak, at its highest level.
All right, let's talk about drafts that we didn't love.
Well, I think Anthony and I are on the same page here. I don't know if we didn't love it, but we were just a bit confused by what the Detroit Lions did. At the time, they had DeAndre Swift, and they just signed Montgomery in the offseason at the running back position, and then you go and draft a running back in Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Now, they ended up trading DeAndre Swift to the Philadelphia Eagles, which makes them even better. But I thought that was an interesting pick for them, and I thought there's probably more need for them, but maybe they feel like they're pretty much set, and he was the best player in the draft for them at that time.
Yeah, I don't get the Lions. I don't. And it's not about the picks. Let me clarify here, because
it's about the need.
I know that they took a local product in Laporta and a tight end in the second round. I hope all of our local products go on to have great success. I'm not talking about the picks itself. When you have all that draft capital, I just got done talking about that with the Texans. You have all this draft capital, you're the Lions, from the Matthew Stafford trade. Now all that is gone. and you take a running back in the first round, and maybe Gibbs winds up being a stud. Okay. But we all said that DeAndre Swift was going to be a stud when they took him out of Georgia in the second round a couple years ago. Then they traded him for pennies on the dollar to the Eagles and found his replacement. Are we going to find Gibbs' replacement in 3 years? That is what I don't understand. And then they need pass rushers. That defense was horrible. We all kind of fell in love with the Lions and the biting the kneecaps and stuff like that with Dan Campbell. Fell in love with the offense, but there's a reason why Jared Goff was traded from the Rams to the Lions and he became available. I think the Lions offensively could be good, but I don't like what they did with their draft capital from that Stafford trade.
Well, and one thing I told Anthony is the draft, anything can happen. And I think the Lions had Devin Witherspoon on their board ready to pick. And when he gets picked one pick prior, it kind of jumbles things up. And so they move back. And then they take the next best player available. And some people believe that Jahmyr Gibbs can be Alvin Kamara 2.0. And if he's to that level, then you look at it and say, maybe it wasn't that bad of a pick. But we will see.
Can I ask you guys this then? Why not stay at 6 and take Robinson?
It's a very good question.
Well, and here's another part of this. Yeah, it's a great question. But I think another part of Detroit is we don't know what Jameson Williams is. He was injured. He barely played last year. Now he's suspended for gambling for the first 6 games. They had their choice of the wide receivers at that point, too. And you can never have, as we've seen, too many wide receivers. You can get running backs in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, right? But the great receivers generally come in the first round. So I would have been inclined more than Gibbs to say, you know what, I'll take a chance on a running back later and try to make sure about that wide receiver position right now.
They brought Marvin Jones back in free agency back to Detroit, so that helps them in terms of their receiving core. I think they just wanted to go after what they felt the most dynamic player on the board. And if you watch Jahmyr Gibbs, Alabama has done an outstanding job of producing every position. And so they felt like he was the best one. I just thought it was an interesting pick, knowing what they already had on their roster. If DeAndre Swift is healthy, he's a very good running back. So it'll be interesting to see how the Lions season plays out this year.
Okay, it doesn't matter what round. Did you have a favorite pick in the draft?
Well, I mean, it's Devin Witherspoon. It was a top 5 pick for my Illini. I loved it.
Yeah. For me, I realize the off-field stuff. I do. I get it. And it's very serious. I do. I understand it. I understand the risk that the Eagles took at 9, but they traded up with the Bears and they got Jalen Carter. At one point, we were talking about Jalen Carter being the first overall selection. Obviously, with the off-field stuff at Georgia, he winds up falling. But if you're the Eagles and you're at that spot and you realize that a dynamic talent in Carter's there, and you have guys, and Carey mentioned this on our Gridiron Guys podcast, you have Brandon Graham, you have Fletcher Cox, you have guys there that are veterans that can say, hey, Jalen, look around you. We're building something big. You get somebody that could have went 1 overall at 9. If that pans out, I think that's a great pick.
Anthony, Carey, Randy, and this is the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Who are the teams to look out for the Super Bowl after the 2023 season? These guys will tell us next as we head down the stretch of this edition of the 101 on Sports on Fox 2. Welcome back to the 101 on Sports. Okay, the Super Bowl champions right now are the Kansas City Chiefs. They look a little bit different than they did when they beat Philadelphia in the Super Bowl, but they're still pretty good. They beat a Philadelphia team that looks like they've enhanced things. Okay, guys, we're sitting here in May. Who's going to be in the Super Bowl in February? Anthony Stalter.
I don't think much changed in the NFC. I think that the top is still the top. You got the Eagles, you have the 49ers. I would include Seattle in that mix. I think Seattle, as Carey noted, I think Seattle had a really good draft. I don't think that Geno Smith...
Who would have ever thought that Geno Smith would be a favorite? Right.
I love it. No kidding. And I don't think that Geno Smith winds up leading the Seahawks to the Super Bowl, but I do think that they're one of the top teams in the NFC. Then, of course, you have to throw in the Saints. But I think from the NFC, I've hyped up the Eagles now for 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to have the Eagles right back in the Super Bowl. I think that the way that they built their roster, they've got depth, they've got talent on both sides. And the way that Howie Roseman added some pieces at the trade deadline last year, he's not afraid to make deals. We've seen that. So I'll have the Eagles. Now, the AFC is a little bit more complicated. Now, I still love the Chiefs. The Bills to me are still a dome team that's built outside. I don't think they're physical enough. You saw Cincinnati go in there and crush them. The Ravens bringing back Lamar is intriguing to me. And then, the AFC South is more wide open, but I don't necessarily love anybody out of there. I think Kansas City should be the favorite, but to sit here and say Chiefs and Eagles again just feels wrong. So I'll do this. I'll go Eagles, and after all the consternation about Lamar and the contract and stuff like that, I'll go with the Ravens. Do I necessarily believe this? No, but I'll be different. I'll take the Birds in there too. So I'll go Ravens and Eagles.
I like that pick. I mean, the NFC we talked about, it feels like it's the easiest path, if there is an easier path to the Super Bowl. The quarterback play in the AFC is just so heavy. There are so many stars and so star-studded. That NFC, I love the Eagles. I love what they did in the draft. I love the pickup of DeAndre Swift. Like I said, if he's healthy, he is a dynamic running back that can catch the ball, run the ball really well. And they obviously got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And you got Jalen Hurts, who played outstanding second in MVP voting last year. But I also like the Minnesota Vikings. I like the pickup of Jordan Addison. And I think if they get defensively, if they can fix some things. I didn't even think about this the other day. Lewis Seen, a safety from Georgia, was drafted early last year. Hadn't played much last year because he was injured. He comes back. So that's essentially another first-round pick that you got for the Minnesota Vikings. They played a lot of good games last year, a lot of close games. I think I would take the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC Championship game. I would take the Philadelphia Eagles in that game. And on the AFC side, I mean, it's going to be, there are so many quarterbacks. We didn't even touch on Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert. Joe Burrow, I think, is on the rise. I wouldn't be surprised if you see another Kansas City and Cincinnati AFC Championship game. And I think the Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, I would take them to come out of there on the AFC side.
I'm with you on the Bengals, and I'm going to disagree with these guys' draft prognostications. I think Detroit, and our guy Mike Martz said last year Detroit was a team that nobody wanted to play at the end of the year. They're so well coached. And I think Brad Holmes, their GM, who was here, by the way, with the St. Louis Rams as a scout, I think he has a clue. And I kind of think Detroit might be a team on the upswing to look out for. So I'm going to go teams that used to have top picks in the draft. I'm going to go Bengals and Lions.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. Yeah. Too, I think with the NFC, let's not sleep on the 49ers. No. I mean, they're so well constructed.
The quarterback situation scares me.
And until it doesn't matter.
It does. Well, I mean, it matters
as long as it's not Josh Johnson.
Yeah. And even then, who knows? I mean, if Josh Johnson had a couple more months of practicing, you never know.
That was a struggle to watch that NFC Championship.
When you look at the 49ers, the way they're built, strong offensive line, strong pass rush, and Kyle Shanahan, you played for Kyle in Washington for a bit. Kyle Shanahan, the way that he constructs his offense, I think is incredible.
And that window's going to close very quickly for the Niners, so they better win quickly because it's not going to be around forever. Anthony Stalter, Carey Davis, you hear them on the Gridiron Guys podcast at 101ESPN.com and on the 101 ESPN app. Hear Anthony every afternoon and Carey every morning on 101 ESPN as well. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Randy.
And we appreciate you tuning in to the 101 on Sports for all of us. Until next week, have a great week, and thanks for joining us here on Fox 2.